Hello friends, welcome back. My name's Melissa. If you're new to my channel, I hope you'll stick around. Thank you to all my returning viewers. So, finished objects. I've finished two sweaters. So the first one you saw a couple of weeks ago, and this is my Metamorphic. The pattern was written by Andrea Mallory, and this is a sweater that I taught as a sweater class at my local yarn shop a few years ago, and I just never finished. I had everything done except for a sleeve. So a couple of weeks ago, I pulled this out of my works in projects bin and was dedicated to finishing this up by the end of the month. I knit this on a US 6. The pattern, I believe, does call for sport weight. I substituted DK and managed to just get a little bit of a firmer, or not firmer, but a denser gauge than, say, a sport weight. I used, for my main color, Rising Tides, Calvert DK in the colorway Dark Matter. It's kind of an eggplanty, like a purplish brown. And then I used Feederbrook Entropy for my contrasting color. The pattern calls for Spin Cycle. I'm not much of a Spin Cycle fan. I don't own any. Feederbrook Farm is rather local to me, as it's in Baltimore County here in Maryland. And so I opted for a more local dyer. That colorway is also called Dark Matter. And as you can see, it is grays, browns, purples. There's a hint of blue in there. So the pattern has this really nice detail running down the center of the front. It also goes down the center of the back. And then it also goes down the outside of the sleeve, but also on the underside of the sleeve as well. I am counting this as done. I got my sleeve, I powered through, got my sleeve done. We've had some really nice weather the past week or so in Maryland, so I was able to get this blocked and I lay it out outside. I essentially soak my sweater, run it through the spin cycle only, in a washer, because there's no agitation. It's literally just spinning all that excess water out. And then I laid it flat and pinned it in a few places outside, and within 40 minutes, it's done. You do have to be kind of careful about the sun fading things. Like, I wouldn't leave it outside all day long, but by spinning all that excess water out in advance, things block very quickly outside in the sun. I have not woven in my ends, but I am counting it done because I took advantage of the nice weather to get it blocked. I'm hoping to be able to wear this maybe in the next week or so. We did have a really nice, beautiful week of weather, like 70 degrees outside, but now we're transitioning back into a little bit of a cooler winter weather, so I might be able to squeak a week or two of wear out of this before spring is really upon us here in Maryland. My other finished object for this podcast is my Metropolitan pullover. This is a pattern by Tori Yu. I think it's one of her lesser known patterns, or less popular patterns. I think it really flies under the radar for such a nice pattern. It was a delight to knit. It is knit on big needles. I held my fingering weight, found it. My fingering weight skein of Radiant Recovery, which is the charity colorway I'll talk about a little bit later. It's leaning on the lens a little bit in that orangey yellow. While it does have those corals, this peaches and a little bit of yellows, it does have a lot of pink and a bit of lavender in it. I held the fingering with my Surrey alpaca in shiplap, which is just the natural colorway of the Surrey. And as you can see, it really mutes or tones down the speckling in the colorway. Move her forward a little bit so you can really see. It really just tones it down a little bit. Don't mind her bumping in, twirling. I had knit, I believe, the majority of the body, and I just had a little bit more to go. I did lengthen mine like I normally do, and then I knocked out the sleeves as well. Because the pattern calls for a US 10, I got gauge on a US 9. It flies off your needles. I ended up using 2 skeins of fingering and about 2.5 skeins of my Surrey alpaca. So not a lot of investment into the actual yarn compared to a more traditional sweater with a denser fabric. It has this beautiful eyelet detail in these somewhat raglan sleeves. It also has those eyelets running across the top of the saddle shoulder. So very lovely detail, very kind of a delicate sweater. This one I'm hoping is going to be a great transitional piece. And I'm talking about those transitional weeks between winter and spring and summer and fall. That time period where it's cool enough outside that you want a sweater, but you don't necessarily want your heavier wool sweaters. This one has a lighter, airier fabric, and I just think it's going to be a really nice piece for those really weird, again, transitional weeks between seasons, at least here in the Mid-Atlantic region, where we really have longer stretches of what I call transitional weather. It has just a bound off. You do a little bit of ribbing and then you bind off, so it has a little bit of a rolled edge. It has I-cord edging on the hem and the cuffs. So beautiful little details that don't take a lot of effort, not really a fancy bind off, but it gives you a much cleaner, more finished, polished look than just simply binding off. But I am really in love with this sweater. And again, I'm counting this done because the weather was nice. I got it blocked. I just need to weave in my ends. Speaking of radiant recovery, that kind of transitions me into my works in progress. The 2 sweaters are the only things that I finished this week. And because I'm preparing for spring festival season, and this colorway is a charity colorway that I'm using to raise money for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, I really thought about, well, how can I showcase this beautiful colorway for people who don't like holding 2 strands of yarn together, or maybe they're not garment knitters. What could I possibly knit? So I chose to use the same colorway, but in a DK base. So here's what it looks like on the DK base. Lots of pinks, corals, peach, a little bit of lavender, golden hues. And so I wanted something that was smaller, and so I chose the Hibernal hat by Summer Lee Designs. And I specifically chose this pattern because I was looking for something that wasn't a vanilla hat, that had a little bit more effort into it, but was still beginner friendly. And this particular hat pattern has faux cables in it. My only concern was, were the speckles going to be too busy for it? And so it wasn't until I got a few inches into this hat that I really was confident that they weren't losing the pattern or the texture in the pattern. The pattern calls for this hat to be knit on a US 3. And so I am through the hat pattern itself. The only thing I have left is to switch my cord to a longer cord so I can do magic loop. I am now ready to do my setup row and start my crown decreases. This pattern has a couple of different options. I chose just the flat brim. There is an option to do a much larger brim and have it fold up if that's a style hat you like wearing. Though it is for me, I was looking for something maybe a little bit softer and delicate to go with this particular colorway versus having that flipped up brim. Once I got into this, you can see it has beautiful faux cables. When you kind of stretch them out a little bit, you'll see that when I'm wearing this over my head, I am not going to lose that cable look. Of course, it's not quite as obvious when it's all cinched in, but again, when I'm wearing it, which is when it matters, you'll definitely be able to see those faux cables. They're not true cables. I won't give any of the details away because it is a paid pattern, but this is a lovely way, I think, to showcase the colorway. You can see that when I hold it up against the sweater, this one isn't watered down by the Surrey alpaca or a mohair. So this is a more accurate reflection of what the colorway looks like. And I think it's a great way for people to see what one skein of the charity colorway can do. This colorway is, I was asked by Frogget Yarns to come up with a colorway to raise money for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. There's a collective of dyers that they approached to come up with their own colorway. And so I will link all those dyers below. Everybody had a different take on it and a story behind it. And so I'll even give a link that if you think you have too much yarn and you don't want another skein of yarn, where you can just monetarily donate to the LLS Foundation. This charity drive runs from, it was March 11th, which was earlier this week. By the time you see this, it'll be last week, through May 21st. We have a 10-week drive to raise money. So I hope that you'll consider, if you don't buy yarn from me, I hope you'll consider buying it from one of my lovely dyers that are in the collective that's participating in this drive. But I will also leave links to, of course, my colorway as well. The next work in progress I have is my vanilla socks. And so for me, my vanilla socks, you might have noticed, this is the Frogget yarn, Christmas yarn from this past Christmas 2024. This was Christmas with my Nomies. It was this main color, and then it came with a mini in the green and a mini in the red. And so last week I had showed you that, or 2 weeks ago, I had showed you that I had finished this sock. Will it fit on there? It will. Handy dandy. And so, but the only thing is I had gotten my second sock started, but I was only 3 or 4 rows down into my cuff. And so I actually have made significant progress. I have finished that cuff. I have done my leg. I did my heel flap and gusset. I turned my heel. I've done my gusset stitches. I am done with all my gusset decreases. Now I'm just in my favorite part, going round and round and around. So there's no reason why I shouldn't have this sock done in the next week or two when we chat again. I do not follow a pattern. I've done enough socks that the numbers are pretty much stuck in my head. I do 1 inch of cuff, and then from cuff to heel, I do a 7-inch leg completely. And then I do 32 rows of a heel flap. I turn my heel, and then I do my gusset. I use US ones, 2.25 millimeter needles, and I do 64 stitches. That's my go-to vanilla sock. And it's just something that I've always stuck with. The other whip that we talked about a couple weeks ago was my Albuquerque Sunset. And this was using 2 skeins of my Talbot fingering in Shell Yeah, which is the whitish color, and then the bright pink color that's kind of getting blown out. It has reds and purples and such in it. Is called Berrylicious. I'm hoping to have these done and ready by the time the end of April comes. But I have not worked on this at all in the last couple of weeks. As you might remember, I'm not a shawl knitter. I really petered out in this one. But I'm still hoping to get it done for Frederick. I just have not been motivated to work on it. But it's beautiful. I love it. The purling, man, the purling. I focused the last couple of weeks on getting the sweaters off my needles and making some progress on my socks. I'm sure I will pick this up because, again, I do want it by the end of April. It's just a matter of getting motivated and having the mental capability to work on it. I do find at the end of the evenings when I pick up my knitting, if I've had a challenging day, for those of you that don't know, I'm a math teacher. If I've had a day that's a little more challenging than normal, or even if I've just had a long day, which is a lot of times the case, my day just kind of drags on a little bit more than it should, then I tend to just kind of be mentally numb. I don't really want to think about it, but I want to knit. It's how I wind down in the evenings before I go to bed and read, which is the other way that I kind of prepare to sleep. And I truly am usually looking for something very meditative, just going around and around. So the other thing that is a work in progress and that I'm hoping to make a lot of headway, I mentioned a couple weeks ago, I have a lot of socks on the needles. And in November of 2024, I had cast on a pair of socks. The thought was, I'll get a pair of Christmas socks done before December's already here. Like, I was in that kind of sort of Christmas spirit, I guess you could say, but I didn't want to open my, Advent sock yarns yet. So I pulled out a sock set that I had from my Advent 2023. It was based on Taylor Swift's Eras tour. And the colorway at the end was called 'Tis the Damn Season. And so I had cast on a pair of socks. And the other reason I cast them on was I was teaching a sock class at my local yarn shop to teach sock knitting, but using 9-inch circulars. And so I wasn't going to teach people out of my head. I needed to have a concrete pattern for them to use. And so I chose the Crazy Sock Ladies vanilla sock on a 9-inch circular. And the problem was I had never knit that pattern. And reading through it, I could tell she did a few things differently than I did, particularly down around the heel. So I went ahead and cast it on. I did the 20 rounds in the cuff like she did. I did the 60 rounds in the leg, just like she does. And then I followed her exact heel instructions, which her numbers for her heel are distinctly different from the way that I do mine. So I'm glad I cast on because it made it a little bit easier. So I'm working them in tandem, basically. So as I finish one cuff, then I cast it on the other cuff. Then I did the leg of one. Then I do the leg of the other one. Then I go back and do the heel of this one. Then I go back and do the heel of this one. So this one, I'll do the foot, and then once I cut that yarn and prepare to do my toe decreases in the blue, I'll do the foot on this one. So they're just kind of worked in tandem back and forth like that. These are both done. This one I've obviously picked up my gusset stitches and I need to work through the decreases. Then I can pick up this one and do this one. This is occupying 2 sock needles, so I would love to get these off the needles. I think that's doable. Maybe not in the next couple of weeks. I should be able to get one done in a couple of weeks after I finish the frogget sock. So I would love to get these off the needles. I'm also kind of itching to cast on. I have already picked out a summer tee that I would love to cast on and get done and have a sample ready by the end of April, which I think is doable. It is a fingering weight tee, so with a little bit of color work. So we'll see. But the pattern is printed. It is highlighted for my sizes. The yarn is wound. It is literally just me casting on. So I'm hoping to do that in the next week or two and then have something to show you the next time we chat. So that's it for everything that I have worked on the last couple of weeks. Hopefully you found some inspiration, whether it's a new pattern to knit yourself. Maybe you want to dive into those whip piles and knock out a project or two yourself. I know I'm really trying to slowly but surely work through mine. I have one sweater that I would love to pick up and finish. I am about 3/4 of the way done with one sleeve. And my problem is do I have plenty of the main color? It's another sweater like this one where you hold a fingering and a mohair together. I definitely have plenty of my main color, but the mohair that I used, I actually sold all of that colorway from that batch. I don't have any more. I discontinued carrying mohair because I prefer Surrey, and most of my customers do as well. So I might have a blank skein of mohair or something floating around that I could, of course, dye. I'm just really not wanting to. I'm focusing on filling up the trailer before festival season. So that's where my head is at in the dye studio. So I'm hoping I have enough mohair to do the other sleeve. I might stop this sleeve, work down through this one, just kind of see how much I have. And if I have to do, say, the cuffs or change something around the wrist, maybe not make the sleeves quite as long, if I have to make some sort of manipulation to make it work, then that's what I'll do. So hopefully I'll be able to share how that project's working out, updates on socks, and have a few finished projects for you. So until next time, happy reading, happy knitting, and I'll see you next week.
Always think of you when spring comes, like it's something in the air at that time. Don't know why. Always dream of you when spring comes. It's like the heat on my skin takes me back to the time met you on